You know, when people talk about the brain, they usually talk about neurons. They're the stars of the show, right? The cells that send all those electrical signals, the ones that make us think and feel and move. And for a long time, that's what scientists mostly focused on. They saw neurons as the main players, doing all the important work. But there's a whole other kind of cell in the brain, lots of them actually. They're called glial cells. And for a long, long time, people thought they were just support staff, like glue holding the neurons together. In fact, glia means glue in Greek. They were seen as the quiet background, not doing much on their own, just making sure the real stars had a nice place to work. But that idea was pretty wrong. It turns out these glial cells are doing a lot more than just gluing things. They're incredibly active. They're vital for everything the brain does, and without them, neurons wouldn't work at all. Or they'd die. Or the whole brain would just fall apart. That's why some people call them the brain's dark matter. Not because they're invisible, but because their importance was hidden for so long. We knew they were there, but we didn't understand what they really did, like the dark matter in the universe, which we know exists but can't see directly. Glial cells were always there, influencing everything, but mostly ignored. And it's a huge oversight, really. These cells make up a big chunk of our brain. In some parts of the brain, there are as many or even more glial cells than neurons. So they can't just be sitting around doing nothing. They have to be important. Think about it this way. If neurons are the individual wires carrying signals, then glial cells are everything else. They're the insulation around the wires, they're the engineers keeping the system running. They're the cleanup crew, they're the security guards, they even help design the circuits in the first place. This understanding is still pretty new. We're only just now really figuring out what these cells do. And it's changing how we think about the brain, about diseases, and about how our minds work. So let's talk about these unsung heroes, these amazing glial cells. There are a few main types of glial cells, and they each have their own special jobs. It's not just one kind of glue. It's a whole team, each doing something different. One major type is called an astrocyte. They got their name because they look a bit like stars, with lots of arms reaching out. Astrocytes are probably the most common type of glial cell in the brain. They do so many things. They're like the ultimate multitaskers. First, astrocytes provide structural support. They literally hold neurons in place. But it's more than just a physical hug. They help keep the right chemical environment around neurons. Neurons are very sensitive. They need the right balance of salts and chemicals outside their membranes to fire properly. Astrocytes help maintain that balance. They soak up extra chemicals that neurons release, like potassium ions. If too much potassium builds up, neurons get overexcited. Astrocytes prevent that. And they're also key players in the blood-brain barrier. You know how your brain is protected from harmful stuff in your blood? That's the blood-brain barrier. It's a very tight seal around the blood vessels in your brain. Astrocytes have feet that wrap around these blood vessels. They signal to the cells lining the blood vessels, telling them to form super tight junctions. This makes sure only good things like oxygen and nutrients get into the brain, and bad things stay out. It's a crucial defense system. Astrocytes also help feed neurons. They take glucose, which is sugar, from the blood. Then they process it into lactate, which is another kind of fuel. And they pass that lactate to neurons. You know, it's like a special energy delivery service, making sure neurons have enough power to do their demanding work. But it gets even more interesting. Astrocytes are right there at the synapses. Synapses are the tiny gaps where neurons talk to each other. When one neuron sends a signal to another, it releases chemical messengers called neurotransmitters into that gap. Astrocytes actually wrap around these synapses. They can control how much neurotransmitter is in the gap and for how long. They can even recycle neurotransmitters, taking them back up and giving them back to the neurons. This means astrocytes are directly influencing how neurons communicate. They're not just passive observers. They're actively shaping the conversations between neurons. This has huge implications for learning and memory. And astrocytes are also involved in cleaning up waste. When neurons work, they create waste products. Astrocytes help clear those out. They're like the janitors of the brain, keeping things tidy. So astrocytes are busy cells. They support, feed, protect, clean, and regulate communication. They're really the backbone of the central nervous system. Then we have another important type of glial cell, oligodendrocytes. These cells are found in the central nervous system, which is your brain and spinal cord. Their main job is to create something called myelin. Myelin is a fatty substance. It wraps around the long arms of neurons called axons. Think of it like the plastic insulation around an electrical wire. Just like insulation makes electricity flow faster and more efficiently down a wire, myelin makes electrical signals travel much, much faster down a neuron's axon. Without myelin, signals would be slow and might even fizzle out. Oligodendrocytes literally extend their arms and wrap them around multiple axons, sometimes many different axons at once, creating these thick, insulating layers of myelin. This speeds up nerve impulses enormously, allowing your brain to process information quickly. And this is critical. If myelin gets damaged, the consequences can be severe. Diseases like multiple sclerosis MS happen when the body's immune system attacks and damages myelin. When myelin is gone, neurons can't communicate properly. Signals slow down or stop altogether, leading to problems with movement, sensation, and thinking. So, oligodendrocytes are absolutely essential for fast, efficient brain function. Now, there's a similar cell in your peripheral nervous system, which is all the nerves outside your brain and spinal cord. These are called Schwann cells. They do basically the same job as oligodendrocytes, but for nerves in your arms, legs, and other body parts. Schwann cells also produce myelin, wrapping around axons to speed up signals. But unlike oligodendrocytes that can myelinate many axons, each Schwann cell usually only myelinates one segment of one axon. Schwann cells also have another very important role. If a nerve in your peripheral nervous system gets cut or damaged, Schwann cells can help it regrow. They form a kind of tunnel or guide for the regenerating axon to follow, helping to repair the damage. In the central nervous system, this kind of repair is much harder. Oligodendrocytes don't really help with regeneration in the same way, and the central nervous system environment is less friendly to nerve regrowth. This difference is a big focus of research for spinal cord injuries. Next up, we have microglia. These are the immune cells of the brain. They're like the brain's resident police force and cleanup crew rolled into one. Microglia are constantly on patrol, sniffing around for trouble. They have little arms that are always moving and checking out their surroundings. If they detect anything unusual like an infection, damaged cells, or inflammation, they quickly change shape and spring into action. They can move to the site of injury or infection, engulf and digest cellular debris, pathogens, or dead cells. They literally eat up the bad stuff. It's a crucial part of keeping the brain healthy and fighting off disease. But microglia aren't just about cleaning up. They also play a role in shaping the brain's connections. During development, and even in adulthood, microglia help prune synapses. This means they remove weak or unnecessary connections between neurons. It's like weeding a garden, making sure only the strongest and most important connections remain. This process is essential for learning and memory. It helps refine our brain circuits. When microglia go wrong, it can be a big problem. If they become overactive or stay activated for too long, they can actually cause damage themselves. Chronic inflammation in the brain, often involving microglia, is thought to contribute to many neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So, keeping these immune cells balanced is super important for brain health. Then there are ependymal cells. These cells line the ventricles, which are fluid-filled spaces deep inside your brain. These spaces are filled with cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. Ependymal cells have cilia, which are tiny hair-like structures that beat rhythmically. This beating helps circulate the CSF around the brain and spinal cord. CSF has several important functions. It provides cushioning for the brain, protecting it from bumps and knocks. It also delivers nutrients and removes waste products. So, ependymal cells help keep this vital fluid moving and doing its job. They also play a role in regulating the composition of CSF. And finally, we have satellite cells. These are found in the peripheral nervous system, especially around the cell bodies of neurons in structures called ganglia. They are somewhat similar to astrocytes in the central nervous system. Satellite cells provide physical support and help regulate the chemical environment around peripheral neurons. They control the flow of nutrients and waste, helping to keep those peripheral neurons healthy and functional. So you see, it's not just one type of glue. It's a diverse cast of characters, each with specialized roles. And these roles are far more active and important than simply holding things together. The deeper we look, the more we realize that glial cells are not just passive bystanders. They're active participants in almost every aspect of brain function. For example, remember how astrocytes regulate synapses. This isn't just about cleaning up neurotransmitters. It means they're directly involved in how strong or weak a connection between two neurons becomes. And that, in turn, influences learning and memory. Our ability to learn new things and remember old ones depends a lot on how easily these synaptic connections can change. This is called synaptic plasticity, and glia are right in the middle of it. Some scientists even talk about a tripartite synapse. That means it's not just two neurons talking to each other at a synapse, but also an astrocyte listening in and even chiming in. The astrocyte can release its own chemical signals that influence how the neurons respond. It's like a three-way conversation, not just a two-way one. This completely changes our understanding of how information is processed in the brain. And glial cells also play a critical role in brain development. From the very beginning, when the brain is forming in an embryo, glial cells are guiding neurons to their correct places. They help establish the initial circuits, they help neurons grow and mature. Without glia, a baby's brain wouldn't form properly. They are literally shaping the brain as it's built. And when things go wrong in the brain, glial cells are always involved. We already talked about MS and oligodendrocytes, but think about brain injury. If you have a concussion or a stroke, glial cells rush to the scene. Microglia clear out dead cells. Astrocytes can form a glial scar, which acts like a bandage to protect the healthy tissue, but it can also sometimes get in the way of regeneration. Understanding how to manage this glial response is a big part of treating brain injuries. And what about mental health? We're starting to find out that glial cells might play a role in conditions like depression, anxiety, and even schizophrenia. Changes in how astrocytes or microglia function could contribute to these disorders. For example, some studies show differences in glial cells in the brains of people with depression. This opens up entirely new ways to think about and treat these conditions, perhaps by targeting glial cells instead of just neurons. Neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are another big area. We know that inflammation is a key feature of these diseases. And who are the main players in brain inflammation? Microglia and astrocytes. If they get stuck in an overactive inflammatory state, they might actually contribute to the progression of these diseases, rather than just cleaning up the mess. So controlling glial cell activity could be a way to slow down or even prevent these devastating conditions. So the idea of dark matter really fits these cells. For decades they were there, making up most of the brain's mass, but their true function was largely a mystery. Scientists were so focused on the exciting electrical signals of neurons that they overlooked the cells that made those signals possible, that nurtured them, protected them, and even fine-tuned their conversations. But now, the spotlight is finally shifting. Researchers are developing new tools and techniques to study glial cells directly. We can now manipulate specific types of glial cells in living animals and see what happens. And what we're finding is truly revolutionary. This shift in understanding changes everything. It means that to truly understand the brain, we can't just look at neurons anymore. We have to look at the whole system, the neurons and the glia, working together in a complex, dynamic dance. The brain is not just a collection of wiring, it's a living ecosystem where every cell plays a crucial part. And because glia are involved in so many fundamental brain processes, they represent a huge new target for developing treatments for brain disorders. Imagine if we could encourage oligodendrocytes to regenerate myelin in MS patients, or calm down overactive microglia in Alzheimer's, or help astrocytes function better in depression. These are no longer just dreams, they are active areas of research, thanks to our growing appreciation for glial cells. So next time you think about your brain, don't just think about those flashy neurons sending signals. Remember the quiet, hard-working glial cells. Remember the astrocytes feeding and supporting and regulating synapses. Remember the oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells insulating and speeding up your thoughts. Remember the microglia protecting and pruning. And remember the ependymal and satellite cells keeping everything else running smoothly. They are the brain's true unsung heroes. They are the essential dark matter, finally stepping into the light, revealing their incredible and vital roles in shaping who we are and how our minds work. And the more we learn about them, the more we realize how much more there is to discover. It's an exciting time for brain science, and glial cells are right at the heart of it.